I think it's one of the most underrated roles when it comes to understanding strategy. And the reason I wanted to have the CFO panel was obviously I'm an MBA. When I did my MBA, I was an engineer, and my accounting professor is not here. He's had to take some back in this morning, Professor Basu at Maryland. And it's so funny that Professor Basu taught us accounting, which was Latin to me when I started to, and I took the class. I'm like, I'm used to engineering, and a lot of people thought that accounting is very black is white. He would say that, you know, his phrase was that it depends. Like, if you look at any line in a financial statement and try to understand what it is, and you ask the question, the counter would say, it depends. I think it depends on what? A lot of factors. And I started to realize how important accounting was. And then once you start looking at the financial statements, everything in there has deep strategic meaning. And I think there are a lot of stereotypes, but people look at strategy. All the glory goes to the CEOs and the CIOs and so forth, even the CMOs. But the CFOs are always in the back, making sure everything is right. So I wanted to bring that to you before. I also wanted to understand you guys from a personal standpoint, but then it takes a certain type of character to manage such a critical resource as capital with internal stakeholders, manage their expectation from their organizations, and also how you go out to capital markets and the markets in general and get the resources needed to take that next step, especially during inflection point. So thanks so much, Simona. Thanks so much, George, for being here. Let's start with you, George. You work in a wide range of industries, from finance to manufacturing to construction, private equity. And I'm sure each tour of professional duty has presented different inflection points in each of these industries. What was the common theme, though, across these inflection points in each of these different industries?
Yeah. But it is a big question. When you think of the CFO role, so many of the skills needed for success in a role are transferable. So industry agnostic to a certain point. You have some credits, you have your understanding of three statements. So you could take those skills and apply that, really anywhere. For me, it's interesting thinking about the subject that we're discussing and how that's affect personally. Oftentimes it was an external factor that led to an internal inflection point. So you could think that just recent years, political unrest or COVID or Great Recession, or there's a number of things. The first inflection point I had was early on in my career, where the bank that I was working at was acquired, and I had the opportunity to move to New York and continue doing the same thing that I was doing. There was aspects of that was compelling until I really started to think about what I was doing and realized that I really didn't like what I was doing. So to the thought of moving someplace new to continue doing it, it just presented that opportunity for a change. For me, that it's almost like I need a catalyst, something external to really force that moment of introspection, that thought. So at that moment, I decided that the technical accounting piece wasn't for me personally. I was more interested in other aspects of finance and accounting. So I transitioned to FP&A, but the thought of...
And what is FP&A?
For the financial planning and analysis. So rather than focusing on the debits and credits, it's more called storytelling, which I think is such an important part of the role, whether you're managing internal stakeholders or partners or vendors, or particularly investors and financing institutions and banks and lenders. So much of what we do is storytelling piece, and I really feel that unless you came from a business development or corporate development type of role, FP&A is the next best place to really be able to sharpen those skills, which has been incredibly important for me in my career. Oh, that's good. That's good too.
Simona, I was going through your profile, and what you was constructing that while you've been by and large in the pharma vertical, you've always been on the cutting edge of a subs industry there. Started with cell therapy to genetics, now to medicinal cannabis. Uh, uh, and you are always trying to manage projects and aspirations and ambitions for something new. So talk to us about how did you raise external capital, uh, for a brand new ideas? Talking about storytelling, what was your journey like as you went from one cutting edge, pharma trend to another to another?
Yeah, so but maybe I'll start with a little bit around my journey as I shall stick through my more than 20 years career and pointed out a majority of that in pharma and biotech, and then transitioned to one of the leading global medical cannabis company out of Canada. And we're large in across the world, except the U.S. We are not present here yet until we finally legalize it someday. But in any case, so what shaped my career has been a function of taking that business hat first and then finance and really help connecting the dots across any of these companies I've been at to ensure we understand what the company needs. And I'll get to the capital part in a second. Because as a finance person, we kind of touch every aspect of the business. And that's the strategic CFO role and position I have always aspired to, but I also mentor others who are looking to be in this profession, as well as when I work with my colleagues and I have at different companies in terms of what the role that the CFO plays. So it's been a combination of having that important seat at the table, taking risks not only from my career perspective but also on of the company, and ensuring that we're ultimately making the right decisions for the organization. So, in order to be effective at that, it's garnering the set of experiences that helps the business then make the best decisions. So, I, similar to what you did, spent my career in different parts of the organization across manufacturing, commercial, helped launch multiple products while I was at Bristol Myers Squibb, corporate FP&A, which is the big picture strategic viewpoint. And then eventually I transitioned to the biotechs, which is basically where every head possible because you need everyone. Everyone is important at a small company, and medical cannabis is its own universe, which I'm sure I'll have an opportunity to talk more about that. So as I took on risks and moved on, especially moving on from BMS, it's a large organization with tons of resources and lots of capital, and took the risk to go to the smaller biotechs. With the goal of, in one case, was hoping to take the company public as a private company, and then the other one that I was at was a public company. That's the gene therapy one, and looking to grow the company and raise capital. What I discovered, and this is where it's so critical to be nimble and constantly adapt to the environment, is that it's not so easy to raise capital, and especially in situations when as the biotech has, especially in the last couple of years, has taken a downturn. So investors have soured on the possibility of what science can bring to the table. The large capital that's needed to run clinical trials, and especially in areas like cell and gene therapy that are transformational, but with a ton of risk. Yes. And so in the situation of the private company I was at, and that was a cell therapy company out of Philly, several patients died in the Philly clinical trials. Were on the cusp of filing to go public. And then the investors pulled away, and essentially we had to restructure the company and sell it off. And so had to be nimble to move quickly given the environment that was happening very quickly. In the case of the public company, biotech, the gene therapy one, high valuation when I started. We were about to raise a follow-on, sort of the what people have told me, and I should have listened, is get the cash or raise the cash, and when you can't, we decided, maybe it wasn't really needed. We had a lot of cash on our balance sheet. Well, what happened is that the trials weren't running as they were supposed to. The market cap kept going down and down and down from $1 billion to, by the time I left, it's $30 million. So you can imagine in a situation where the company in a short amount of time is going down rather quickly, it's incredibly difficult to raise capital. And so what we ended up doing, and that's where the FP&A, financial planning and analysis mindset comes in, is how do you scenario plan? how do you take the existing cash you have and stretch it as far as you can? And many companies have been doing that over the last couple of years, and some, unfortunately, don't survive. But that's the key role that I find a CFO plays, because it really helps the CEO and the management team and the board make the right decisions, especially when situations are tough from a capital waste
So
perspective.
I love that, and I think those in the room who've not delved deep into the CFO world, this strategic CFO of the Simona kind is exactly what we wanted to bring to this panel and share your views. And I think George, your journey is so instructive as well, to kind of come out of the accounting world and then go to the FP&A world. I kind of skipped the introduction. I asked you a roundabout question, so I want to come back to you. And thanks, Simona, for using my question to introduce yourself. George, talk to us about your journey, briefly, if you can. I mentioned that you got to so many different industries.
Yeah.
Let's cap us out to 2025.
Yeah. My career is probably a good example of what not to do and what to do in equal parts. So I had a very non-traditional path to my private equity roles. I didn't know what private equity was. Probably till I was 30 years old. I heard the term, but didn't really know what that meant. But I'm from Western New York, and I'm a dedicated Buffalo Bills fan. So unfortunately, Mr. Mann left, but the Super Bowl 26, he had up for it, and my Atlanta Bills fell to the Redskins in that year. So I think it's
Was that year 4, or what year was that?
that was year 4.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So, so from Western New York, it worked in a variety of industries, from financial services to business services, construction, manufacturing, private equity, and the path to my current role was nonlinear. There was challenges. There was times where taking lateral moves, or at certain times lesser roles, gave me the necessary experience, right, to level up in the next for the next opportunity. For the past few years, been working at a company in Northern Virginia called Extreme Steel. So we are helping to build data centers across the area. So I'm sure we'll probably get into that a little bit later in the discussion, but it's been a very interesting inflection point for the company, going from a legacy lifestyle business for the past 20 years to transitioning to a professional organization, getting ready for the growth, and developing the infrastructure internally, and partnering with the stakeholders to put us in the best position to keep up with the demand in the area, and then ultimately make a decision on what next steps look like in terms of an exit. So keeping that horizon in view, and deciding kind of when to time the market, just how things evolve.
I mean, the basic question I'm going to ask you is there a bubble? I mean, people are looking at your segment to see as a proxy, like, okay, data centers are really getting built. Must be something must be happening.
Yeah. So I have to be careful what I say, because the CIOs are going to fact check me on this. So I'm not an expert on data centers, but what I see in my role is insatiable demand. Data center alley is 15 minutes from, well, probably longer with traffic, but we're right in the heart of data center land, and there's a reason why Northern Virginia, Sterling, Ashburst, had the concentration of data centers, right? The infrastructure is there, the location. Traditional data centers are very location driven, right? So being close to this MSA, close to the consumers, the data. And as each data center gets built, infrastructure gets built along with it. So there's the availability of land, and just makes it a very appealing location. Moving into the non-traditional, the AI data centers, right? It's strategically different, but it's for the data center owners. But from what we do, it still takes a phenomenal amount of skill and labor and boots on the ground to actually construct these data centers.
They're getting built.
They're getting built. Our backlog has never been. I think our backlog has tripled over the past 12 months. We've had record-breaking revenue over the past 4 years. We had never done a data center project prior to 2021. Now it represents approximately 75% of our portfolio. So it's absolutely
Crumb area, bro. Sounds like an inflection point to me,
yes. We've been in a constant inflection point for seemingly the past.
Yep. You're like, we're literally in it.
We're gonna, but there's no slowing down. The investments, I think if you keep up with the headlines, I think we're up to $3 trillion in committed investments between AI, data center construction, chip. That includes auto manufacturing. It's in that range. But there's not enough service providers. There might not be enough electricity to even service what we're talking about. So when you talk about inflection points, there's going to have to be a fundamental shift in how we're building, what the geographies, and how we're providing the power to these facilities is going to have to go through some scissors.
So I want to come back to you and look a little more inward. You're in these environments where your companies are trying to go reach for the bull, right? Tell me about your relationship with the CEOs, the internal stakeholders. We talked about the external stakeholders. Capital is hard to raise. I work with founders. I work with CEOs. Nothing against you, Anne, but they're not the normal bunch. I mean, Anne has like optimism, like that's beyond Mount Everest, things like that. But tell us about how the CFO, especially like in industries and in opportunity that companies that are really going for the moon, operated with the internal stakeholders.
Yeah. Oh, I'll get to that, but I want to pick it back a little bit based on something you said in terms of career journey. It made me think about something that I didn't mention earlier. Career journeys not being linear, which I think for the most part, probably a lot of people can say that. And I recall fairly, I wouldn't say too early on in my career, but maybe, I don't know, 8 years ago now, one of my mentors, who was a more senior person at Bristol Myers Squibb, essentially said, like, where do you want to go, someone? Like, what is your North Star? And that's such a simple question. But I think a lot of people, especially early on in our careers, are not entirely sure. And that applies not only from a personal career development standpoint, but also it applies to, how you manage companies. You need to have that strategic direction and that North Star. And for me at that point in time, it's like, I want to be a CFO. And it's not going to happen in Bristol Myers Squibb, just like, impossible at a $100 billion market cap company. But I will need to take the plunge and go elsewhere. And in order to reach that goal, which wasn't going to be immediate, you sort of have to scan what the needs are in order to get to that point. And so as I looked at my other companies and, ultimately where I landed in the biotech, and at Aurora, is the experience I didn't have, and which was some of that external stakeholder facing experience with investors, with how do you tell a story about the company, and how do you sell yourself, your company, that is. And so getting those kind of experiences, if you don't have them, it's so paramount. It gets people to say, oh, I can do this. And if you're not thoughtful and strategic about the path you take, it's hard to get there. And that applies to many ways to business as well. And so to then get to the question you raised, because that falls into very much in interaction, how the CFOs interact with the CEOs and other stakeholders, boards as well.
Yes.
As it's so critical to have a strong relationship at the board level, is ensure you bring that strategic mindset to the table, and with the data supporting it. So that's where the FP&A side of it, the analytics, the transparency, and understand what's happening behind the numbers, and ultimately the decisions that management needs to make. It's not just the CFOs or CEOs' decision. It's ultimately getting that collective input from other, business leaders at the company is very variable. So the CFO really brings a lot of that together. So that's the role that I played in many of the companies I've been at, again, wearing that business hat first and then the financial implications, and really help influence how we were making choices around, capital, cash management, investments, which ones would get the largest return cash is king, and so it's limited. And how do we know which investment to put our money behind, and what's going to drive the biggest impact? So having some clarity or understanding of that, and that's where the teams behind me, like what are the analysis and the insights to that, allowed me when we had those very important discussions to say, this doesn't make sense or this makes sense. And I think the how's the people who you told that this doesn't make sense, how do they handle it? But that was it's a great question. Yeah. It's and that's the fine line you play because as a CFO or as a finance person, let's just say the worst thing you can come across is like the bad cock.
Yeah.
And I've always been incredibly mindful of that because it's just you can't influence when people just basically don't want to listen to you. And so it's really about collaborating, absolutely collaborating with the business so you understand what the dynamics are, what the needs are, challenges, and knowing that ultimately we have one goal, is making the company successful. And so bringing that to the table that's not self-serving or it's just all about the numbers is really important. So that's something that I applied over and over. It hasn't always been easy because let me just give you an example of my current role. So my boss, the CEO, and myself are the only two Americans at a Canadian-based company, but global. We have a presence in Europe, Australia, and New Zealand, so a lot of cultural area considerations. And I was brought in to really sort of also be the bad cop, be that the resource. So my boss be the one that would be doing all of that. And, there are times where I have to be careful when I wear that path versus more collaborative, more consensus-driven, which Canadians tend to be a lot more of that, versus the American go, 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 directness, etc. So I've had to navigate rather carefully and, so sort of have to get a feel for it.
So the landmines have been successfully avoided.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, sometimes it takes a little bit more, more effort to bring people along.
George, how have you navigated these landmines? Tell us a little bit more about the private equity side of the business, where you're looking at the finances of multiple portfolio companies. What changes there? I mean, are you more in the mentor role? Each of those companies is trying to do something. They're by definition that they're in your portfolio, they're going through an inflection point. So tell me more about how, when you aggregate on all the stuff, how does the mindset change?
Yeah. I think it ties in so well to what you were saying about building consensus and the technical skills for a CFO are one thing, right? But there's a lot of people who are very, very good at the technical side, and that's important. That's a skill. But I think the most effective CFOs, they have an understanding for the technical side, but it's the people skills. It's the being empathic and being able to build consensus, and delivering hard messages to people. But one of the things that makes it easier for me to have those conversations is the recommendations are often data driven, and so it's not something that is it's not a gut feeling that I have that I'm giving you this information or this guidance or trying to build a consensus around. There's numbers to support it. So that's where relying on your teams or the technical experience you accumulate over the years is to have that we try to be as bulletproof as we can, right? Because inevitably, if we're delivering something that's bad news or runs counter to what the rest of the team wants to do, you're going to have to support that opinion or that position. And oftentimes, we have the analysis to support it. We have the historical trends. We have a pulse on the markets, and we kind of see what the expectations are going to be. So I think that's something that's really, really important. And just in my career, I've seen a shift, from when I started the from when I started in finance and accounting roles and being a business partner or strategic partner to the executive teams or to operations. It's being able to bring people together, but walking them through to make sure that there's an underlying understanding for what the KPIs are telling you or what the trends are telling you. So I think that's, whether it's an individual portfolio company or looking at, the overall portfolio of businesses, coming from that place of data-driven analysis and that applying the people skills on top of that to bring people together.
That's this. I think this is the reason why I wanted this panel to showcase the how composite your roles really are. Beyond preparing financial statements, talking to analysts, etc. The internal part. That's why I want to break this out. How you have to kind of carry the team together, and oftentimes you have to provide the data to make good or tough decisions, internally and externally as well. I've been open for questions, but before that, I asked the panelists. I want to know what your guiding philosophy is, Simona. And I want to piggyback another question that I've been meaning to ask you. You're now in an industry that is relatively new from a social or legal acceptance standpoint. How has that experience challenged your guiding philosophy? Because clearly you don't take simple challenges. You take complex challenges. So combine the two things for me and tell me how navigated this, right? Almost uncharted waters, professionally, and what the guiding philosophy is. That
So I would say it's probably three things that up to the top for guiding principles, and it gets into like how I ended up in medical cannabis. Take risks. I've done that in my career. Okay, taking risks in supporting and advising the business. High risk, high reward. And in the industries that I've been, you have to take risks. Pharma, biotech, it's ultimately all about taking risks. So that is the key one. Another one is it's just no more go. I'm very goal driven, and so something from a career standpoint, but also in terms of where I push the company's schedule. And so we higher, then everyone kind of rallies behind it. You have the strong goals and you show the results for that. And then ultimately it's about the people. And I've always looked to build strong teams because ultimately you can't do this on your own. I don't want to do that. It's not the way to lead either. But building a really strategic and knowing when you can make changes. And so, especially having gone to numerous companies, I've had to make some hard decisions in moving people out and, build training and stronger talent and continuing to develop them. And so that helps reach those things like the goals in terms of where the company needs to go. So when I was approached by a recruiter to join Aurora, I was like, well, cannabis, I'm obviously aware of it. I'm like, I don't know, I spent my career in pharma and biotech. But I kind of turned that on its head. And I said, well, ultimately what drove a lot of what I'd done in my career, and even why I started Persimmon within the first place, is it's all about the patient. And it's about providing treatment options for what patients need. And so that's been at the background of like sort of the mission behind the mission. For me personally, why I've been in this industry for so long. So as I learned more about Aurora and the fact that so many, the products, basically our biggest customer base, they're patients. And it's really providing the treatment options that patients need in its fullest view. And there is definitely more acceptance of that, which is great for the industry and for patients too, for people to have more options. So for me, like I took that approach to joining a cannabis company because ultimately it's for the greater benefit. And it's a growing industry. I meet with I do a lot of roadshows, and with clinicians, with the pharmacists. We talk to a lot of patients, and there's a real need for it. And so it's great to be able to play that role and also bring the learnings from the pharma healthcare industry because there are lots of similarities. Regulatory, operational, and of course the end customer, the patient. There are a lot of similarities that I'm applying from my old world to the new one. So I would say, yeah, the risk, initial it's like, oh, is this what I want to do? It's a boring company, which I love it, but it was the best fun I had at a job. But initially, it sort of made me pause when I first considered the thought.
Good luck going forward. I mean, you don't take easy challenges, and I hope you're successful. Same question for you, George. Through your different paths that you've tread, what has been your guiding philosophy?
Yeah, it's evolved over time. But most recently, I would say maximizing stakeholder returns. Stakeholders. Okay, right. So it's not just shareholders. Although we love our shareholders, couldn't do what we do without them. But there's so many other stakeholders. So many players in the ecosystem, right? Are from your employees and your people, taking care of them, to vendors, strategic partners, customers. Rising tides, right? So if we're doing well by all those stakeholders, then we're going to be successful.
That's interesting because the rising tide example is typically do something good at the macro level and the micro will benefit. What you're saying is that do good across the micro levels and the micro will automatically count, which is what we need. I think, a general, we have business, society as well. I'm open for questions. Okay, Andrew?
Simona talked about her North Star. I've had 6 CFO friends who have attempted to transition to the CEO role. 5 have failed. The one that succeeded embraced governance and culture and leadership and storyteller. I'm so refreshed to hear 2, I think, future CEOs we're looking at, who knows when. But to make that transition from the horse blindery of numbers to a much broader perspective, I've learned from the one that succeeded, is really the key. Just in case CEO, why not reach for the stars, is in both of your futures. A very wealthy entrepreneur once told me, numbers follow, they don't lead. And I felt like listening to this panel, both of you embrace that, whether you've ever heard that expression or not. And I just want to applaud both of you for not being horse blinder in taking the numbers as everything, because many CFOs don't advance to the next level. But, they're still playing a very important role in the company, but don't get to that corner office. So congratulations to both of you.
Thank you. Corner office,
I'd still be a law firm.
Good morning, Q. So when you're scaling up, especially as rapidly as you have experienced outside of funding, what's the biggest challenge that you encounter?
Either one.
Yeah.
Okay, how about I'll take a stab at it. It's a good question. It's aside from the CAC, it's hard to not think of the capital because, especially a post-COVID world, it's almost impossible times not to run out of cash. So we're always fundraising, but it's the people side. I think that's the most challenging. And it's in this role it can be hard. And Simona, you alluded to it. Sometimes you have to make changes quickly because it's what's in the best interest of the organization. But oftentimes it's what's in the best interest of that person that you might be moving. It doesn't do anybody any good to be in the wrong chair for too long. They're not going to be successful, and it's going to end up impacting either myself, my team, other employees or stakeholders in the organization. But a lot of people, what I do when we come in and do an acquisition, what I tell people is, I'm not going to look to move anybody out. Like, I hope that everybody is here for the journey, and I'll be open and honest and transparent with you. I expect the same, but a lot of you won't be here because change is really hard. And especially where I play in, kind of the middle market space, especially in the lower middle market, it's even more challenging. But people have been doing the same things for so long, and they're just not interested in learning a new ERP system or transitioning to a different, platform or changing the way that we move through month end close. There's just so many different changes that have to come with an event like that, that it's really the people side that's so important.
So to add to that, and not to introduce a boring topic like process and infrastructure, but and quite frankly, if those things are not where they should be, everyone suffers, not just finance. And so what happens as companies grow, and I'm going through this big phase in my company right now, as a company has grown very quickly, and even before I came, I've only been there a year and a half now. Everything was bolted on, whether it's through acquisitions or just expansion of the business. And as a result of it, a lot of what we're doing is very manual and it's prone to errors and just a lot of churn and noise in the system. And again, not just finance, but more broadly. And so we're at a point where we're just like ripping off Band-Aid, as painful as that is, because obviously it involves resources, money, and people to fix this. And it's at a point where we have to, because we cannot keep operating the way we've been operating, and we're not going to be successful as we continue to build out. And so my advice to companies, as they're going through that sort of growing pains or phases, really step back and kind of deal with the boring stuff like process, policies, infrastructure, and find a way to fix it as quickly as possible, and use technology and automation and AI, all the buzzwords, as much as possible. I mean, if you need to bring in experts like, the consulting firms or the big four firms who do this for a lot of companies, it's a worthwhile investment. Because I know it's like, who wants to spend money on that? Because I can't tell you how painful it is for a company as it's scaling up to not have that foundation in place. And people don't want to work at your company. They're like, I'm going to go somewhere where I have to deal with these headaches or work too many hours or weekends, etc. So thank you for the question, because I think it's so critical as companies grow.
I think just to kind of piggyback on your answers, and Anne and I were talking about this, so we were preparing for this. The word culture is just so kind of encompasses processes and so on and so forth. So I'm guessing as you're scaling up, the culture has to evolve. I mean, the core, passion stays there, but you have to understand that a certain level of maturity has to also, come along with the process. And that also shows at how the core culture is adaptable, is nimble enough to kind of grow along with it. So last thing, few words on culture. What does that mean to you? When I say culture, what do you think about?
Yeah. It's all having the same goals and objectives in place in terms of where, whatever one contributes to the organization. And I focus very much around empowering my team and broadly as well, not just my team. And, even tell people, it's like, you're CFOs of your own area. And having that, setting that expectation and empowering them to get like, oh, I can influence where this goes. One, means I don't have to find solutions to every problem out there, which I absolutely don't want to do. And two, I want to develop my teams so that way we're stronger together and driving the company forward. So it's nuance changes in how I interact with the team, how we develop our people to move from they're just doers. You're empowering them to get us to be
Leaders in their own right.
Exactly. And then the other piece too, before you add, George, is, my company's remote first. Although I go to Canada, it seems like every other week or elsewhere in the world. And what I'm trying to do with the cost linking more visible, except for the manufacturing sites, everyone has to be there all the time. But from the corporate functions, is if you're not in front of people, it's hard to build that culture. And with COVID and post-COVID, I think a lot of companies are trying to navigate around that. And we want to be respectful of people wanting to work from home, but as leaders, you got to make an effort to do it from a Yoki fold. And I make them come to the office of how I'm commuting from America. You work maybe 1 hour from somewhere in Greater Toronto, place you live, because it's important that we come in together and that we do social stuff as well. So that's another aspect to the culture in terms of empowering peace and bringing everyone together.
What does culture be to you?
Yeah, I mean, just to piggyback off of that, it's easy to talk about culture. It's really hard to live it and execute on it and make sure that it cascades throughout the organization. It's so important for the leadership, the C-suite, or whatever your organizational structure is, to be aligned on what that culture is and to talk about it and to lead by example. If your team see you living by your mission, vision, values, by a culture that they fit about her on that.
So it's an awesome panel. As I said at the outset, this was a wild card panel because I've done a lot of CIO, CMO, CEO kind of stuff. For the first time, I sat down with CFOs, and I think I got more than I wanted. I mean, this is like incredible. There's the strategic lens through which you have walked us through and allowed us to see what you do is invaluable. And wish you the great best in some challenges that you've taken on. So thanks again.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.